So I've been asked to run through some of the questions from 11C, so I'm just going to run through a couple of examples here. So if you're having a bit of trouble with this particular section, watch away and hopefully we'll be able to work on those issues. So the important thing to remember is everything's measured in latitude and longitude is measured from two reference points, and one of them is the equator, which is this line here, and the other is the Greenwich meridian, which is this line here. And so with regards to the Greenwich meridian, we can either be east or west of the Greenwich meridian. So when we're talking about the Greenwich meridian, we're going that way. So the Greenwich meridian runs through England to a place called Greenwich. If you want to think of it as London, that's fine. It's pretty much in the same spot. And then obviously we can be either north or south of the equator, which most of us have a much stronger understanding of the idea of the equator. So we can either be a certain number of degrees north of the equator or south of the equator. So the equator is a latitudinal line, and the latitudinal lines, as you can see here, they get smaller as you get closer to the south and north pole, whereas the longitudinal lines, they sort of crisscross at the north pole, and they're all the same length. They all go from the North Pole to the South Pole and then back up again. So that's how those little guys work. So if we think about this particular first question, we've got this point A here, and they've given us the coordinates of point A up here. So 60 degrees north and 70 degrees east. So we look at point B. Now point B is on the same latitudinal line. It's just as far north of the equator as A is, but it's in a different place as far as longitude is concerned. It's actually on the Greenwich meridian. So for question A here, and I'll just put a 1 in front, there we go. For question A here, we can look at that and go, well, the coordinates of the point B, then for the latitude hasn't changed. So we're still at 60 degrees north. It's still 60 degrees north of the equator. The latitude comes first, the longitude comes second. But longitude, we're on the Greenwich meridian, so we're at 0 degrees. So that's our position of point B. So the position of point C, which is down here. Now point C we've changed latitude. Now we're on the equator, but we're still as far east as A is. So in this particular example, we're 0 degrees because we're on the equator. As far as our latitude is concerned, but our longitude is still the same distance away from the Greenwich meridian as A is. So that was 70 degrees east in the original, so it's still 70 degrees east. What's the maximum possible value for latitude? So latitude is the one that goes up and down the Earth, up to the North Pole and down to the South Pole. So we're talking about these smaller lines. So the maximum we're going to get to is 90 degrees. So think about it as being perpendicular to the equator. And we're going to hit those at both the North and South Poles. Okay, so that's sort of how we do that. And I'll run through a couple of examples here. We'll do question 2 next. So question 2A. So Brussels is at 50 degrees north and 4 degrees east, and Lima is at 12 degrees south and 77 degrees west. Which is close to the equator? So when we're thinking about close to the equator, we're thinking of, is it north or south of the equator? So we're thinking about those latitudinal lines. So for that first question, we're interested. For this little question here, we're really just interested in that value and that value. So what I've got here is a situation where 50 degrees north or 12 degrees south. So if we think of the equator, we use a number line. Look, that's a terrible start to a number line. Let's just draw ourselves a little number line. That's a pretty crooked one. It's pretty hard to draw here. So at 0 degrees, we've got the equator. And Lima is 12 degrees south, so we'll think of south as like a negative value. And Brussels is 50 degrees north, so we'll think of north as like a positive value. So what we're actually interested in is which one is closer. So in this particular case, 12 degrees south of the equator is closer than 50 degrees north. So for this particular question, the answer is going to be Lima. Now for B, we want the difference in latitude, so we'll stick with this timeline that we drew first. The difference in latitude is going to be if I go all the way from 12 degrees south up to 50 degrees north. Now, the way I've done it in other lessons is to sort of do it as a takeaway. So we think of the one, if we think of either north or in regards to latitude, if we think of north as the more positive, and we take away the more negative from the more positive. So if we start with 50 degrees north, take away 12 degrees south, and we can kind of think of this as 50, take away negative 12, because I mean, if we look at our number line here, it does look like 12 degrees south is a negative number. So we can say, well, when we take away a negative number, we add it, so we end up with 62 degrees. So that's the difference there. I'm just going to go across here for C. So for C, it actually asks what's the difference in longitude between Brussels and Lima. So in this particular case, we're now looking at the east and the west. The longitude runs either east or west of the Greenwich Meridian. So once again, we can draw ourselves a little number line, put the Greenwich Meridian in as 0, and then we look at these two. So Brussels is 4 degrees east. So Brussels we think of as a positive number. It's 4 degrees. My gosh, I can't draw a degree. 4 degrees east. And Lima is 77 degrees west. So we think it's sort of down here, 77 degrees west. And so that's Brussels, and that's Lima. So we want to know the distance. So what we're interested in is that difference there. So once again, if we think of the most easterly as the most positive and the most westerly as the most negative, we can work this out by just saying, well, let's just take away the most easterly, take away the most westerly. If those are words, we're just going to stick with them anyway. So the most easterly in this case is at 4 degrees. The most westerly is at basically negative 77 degrees, because we think of anything west of the Greenwich Meridian as a negative number. So what we end up there is with 4 degrees plus 77 degrees, because that's because when we take away a negative, it becomes a positive. So that becomes 81 degrees. I'm being distracted by the room next door who are doing a Zoom, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, so that's that one. I'm going to leave question 3 because it's very much like question 2. So follow that process, and we'll leave that one alone. But I will jump into question 4. So 4A, we've got Nagoya is located at 35 degrees north, 136 degrees east. So we want to know what is determine the coordinates of a point that are 20 degrees due south of Nagoya. So if we're taking something south of Nagoya, then we're interested in the latitude. So this first figure is going to be what concerns us in both those two questions. And in the second two questions, we're going to be concerned with the longitude, because that moves east and west. So as we go through those, 20 degrees south of Nagoya, so Nagoya is 35 degrees north. So if we're going to move south, we're going to take away 20. So if we do that, we're going to end up with 15 degrees north. But of course, so the coordinates are going to be 15 degrees north, and our latitude hasn't changed. It'll be still 136 degrees east. So if we have a look at B now, 20 degrees north of Nagoya. So this time we're sort of taking those 35 degrees north and we're adding 20 to it. We're going up, we're going further north. So we're going to end up with 55 degrees north. So our coordinates is going to be 55 degrees north, and we haven't changed our latitude. We're still the same distance away from the Greenwich Meridian. We're still at 136 degrees east. So those are the coordinates of points that are north or south. So then moving on to example C, 20 degrees due west. So we started at 136 degrees east. We've moved west, so we're taking away, we're going closer, we're going back towards the Greenwich meridian. So we're going to end up with 116 degrees east, which in this case is going to mean we're going to end up at, we were at 35 degrees north to start with. So on this particular occasion, we're not going north or south, we're just going to the east, so 116 degrees east. And then finally for D, we want to move 20 degrees east. So we've got 136 degrees east and we're adding 20 degrees. We're going a further 20 degrees towards the east. So we're going further away from the Greenwich meridian. So that's going to get us to 156 degrees east. So our coordinates are going to be still 35 degrees north, but now at 156 degrees east. Okay, so it's that north-south that always comes first, and then the east-west. So deal with the equator first, deal with the Greenwich meridian second. So you'll see that question 5 is very similar, so have a crack at that. And then I think I'll leave that explanation there. If you have trouble with any more questions, feel free to ask. Anything further on from there, though, probably a good idea to make a note of it, and we can always address that in the Zoom session this week. Have a good day.